Hey guys, and happy Thursday. Thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. I am not in my typical Ghost Biker garage. I am actually in a little small cell here at the historic Scott County Jail. I'm actually in the visitation room here at the museum, and I've got a great show tonight for everybody. I hope you watched last night's episode and was able to catch up, so you'll know what we're talking about. If you've not, then you'll definitely want to go back and watch it because we've got a lot of really cool things to talk about tonight. I'd like to wish everyone a happy 11/11. It is Veterans Day, so thank you to all of the currently serving active military as well as our veterans out there. Thank you all so much for your sacrifice. And also, like I said, it's 11/11 Portal Day. So I just wanted to say hello briefly to the people over here in the chat room. We got Joe and Michelle, Janet, and yes, she does have me locked up tonight. Um, so, so yeah, we'll hopefully be able to go live here at the jail at some other time and actually show some of the jail. But I'm going to go ahead and bring tonight's guest on. Like I said, if you watched last night's episode, it was episode 4 of season 4, and it was on the infamous Ma Barker house. And so, what better person to have on than someone who was a docent there and also was the very first paranormal investigator to investigate that location. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on my best friend, my business partner, and the lead founder of Soul Sisters Paranormal, Dr. Kristy Sumner.
Hey, Miranda, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. One door away.
Yeah, well, we got to keep it separate here. And
hey, everybody, thanks for joining tonight.
So I'm going to be manning the comments over here as well as talking about the episode. So you all just kind of bear with me. If you have a comment or a question about last night's episode or something for myself or Dr. Sumner, please feel free to put it in the comments. And as soon as we finish our thoughts, we'll pull that up and we'll address it. So go ahead, Dr. Sumner, and tell us a little bit about you and your team and what you did there at the Ma Barker house, how you became what you were there.
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you for having me tonight. And I really enjoyed last night's episode. You did a great job with that. And, being able to investigate there with you and just kind of watching, because that was really one of our first investigations together. So to be able to watch how you investigated, I mean, that was a really cool experience for me. So to be able to do that at the Ma Barker house was just doubly exciting. But the Ma Barker house has always been a fascination to myself and my sisters. We actually grew up probably about 5 miles from that house. My grandparents' house was only about 2 miles from there. So every time we would stay with Nana and Granddaddy and we'd go into Ocklawaha to get the mail, every time we'd pass by that house and Nana would say, that's where the Ma Barker shootout happened. That's where Ma Barker died. So we always grew up hearing the stories up until probably the early 2000s. They actually did reenactments there. So you could take a lunch, go and watch the mock shootout. It lasted, about 3 or 4 hours because that's how long the actual shootout lasted. So it was a lot of fun to just to kind of go and see it from that perspective. But to be the first paranormal investigation team to go in there and investigate that house, to us, it was really a dream come true because, like I said, we grew up hearing the stories of it. And so it was just a great investigation for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I said, y'all were the first. I was honored to be the second and to be invited by you to be able to go in there and highlight. So, yeah, that was actually one of our first investigations. We had investigated at Henry River Mill Village in Hickory, North Carolina. And this was actually one of a full week of investigations.
Correct.
That you and I did. It was like a 10-day trip to Florida.
It was pretty wild.
Yeah, it was like the second to the last. I mean, it was a pretty epic and extreme, like 4 nights in a row
Hmm.
of investigations. So it was really cool. I think what I found to be one of the most fascinating things about this, other than the fact that everything was original, is the fact of just how isolated this location is.
Hmm.
You don't have the noise contamination, you don't have the light pollution. It really made for quite an eerie backdrop for the whole thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In 2016, the house was actually moved from the original shootout location. The property was being sold. It was built by Carson Bradford in 1930, and the family maintained it up until 2016. Some variation of the Carson Bradford family maintained control and possession of this property, and so they decided to sell it. And the new owners didn't want the house; they were going to demolish the house. And so Marion County paid $250,000, and they put it on a barge and they floated it across Lake Weir, about 4 miles away across the lake. And they put it on Kearney Island State Park. And you're right. It sits on 40 acres. It's completely isolated. And that's what makes it such an interesting investigation location, because there is no light pollution. There's no noise
No.
pollution. The nearest road is about a mile away, and that's a small country road. So it's one of those locations where you have complete control of the environment. There's no power except for an extension cord from a tent pole that runs the air conditioning system. There's no power in the house. There's no water in the house. So it's one of those great locations that you're locked down without any environmental interference.
Yeah, I mean, which the air conditioner was definitely necessary,
Oh, absolutely.
because
It's Florida, people. Come on.
it was Florida, and it was Florida in July.
Mhm.
So when I had done this one, it was July 5th, and we were having some electrical storms
Mhm.
that evening, which was really interesting as well. We had what we had done is, when we got there fairly early in the evening, set everything up. I believe I had 10 cameras
Mhm.
and 8 to 10 audio recorders,
Mhm.
set all of those up, and then we left for, I think we left for 2 or 3 hours, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yep.
And so we left the stuff running. I've still got to finish going through some of that camera footage, and I've got a few more things that I actually want to release from last night's episode that wasn't in there. But we left it. We came back, and it just seemed very charged the
It
whole
was.
time. And there were a few times, and I didn't know if it was the fact that because the location has not been investigated by anyone other than yourself. I didn't know if it was because of that, or if some of the environmental factors maybe played a part in that.
I think a little bit of both. After our investigation there, I became a docent after that, so I was in there routinely. At least a couple of times a week, I would lead day tours. I would be able to. I had a key, and I would go in and just sit, and I'd open the door, and I'd say, hey Ma, hey Fred, and you would hear things, right? You would hear footsteps, you would hear good mornings, and so I think there was that familiarity factor as well. But also, to your point, the fact that it hasn't been investigated a lot, and I think Ma and Fred Spirit really are there to tell their stories. When we first investigated there, we actually investigated on the anniversary of the shootout. So on January 15th, we set up our cameras and we left them run till the morning of January 16th, which would have been the 83rd anniversary of the shootout at that point. And my theory was that the spirits were going to go with the house, even though it wasn't on the original land where the shootout was. The spirits were going to move with the house because Ma and Fred were very nomadic in life. They did not have a home base. They were a gang that crisscrossed the Midwest, created, robbing these banks and doing other various criminal activities. So they never had a home base. So if their spirits are going to remain anywhere, it's going to be in the location where they were killed. And I think they have very strong feelings about the fact that to them, they were murdered by the FBI. Of course they were, but it wasn't, something that they just happened to get caught in crossfire. I think that they actually think that they were murdered and tracked down specifically to be murdered by the FBI, because J. Edgar Hoover had to make a statement. He had to make sure that the Barker Karpus gang was eliminated that day. So to your point, I do think it's the residual energy as well as the intelligent energy that's there, and that's what makes such a great investigation for you.
So you don't think they could have been taken alive?
I think they could have been. I absolutely do. I think at that point they were so stubborn that they weren't going to give up, because they thought they had the high ground, right? For 4 hours, they were in the upstairs, raining bullets down on these 12, what they would call the flying squad. They were a group of elite FBI agent handpicked by J. Edgar Hoover, who tracked Ma and Fred to this location. And so they thought they had the high ground against the flying squad. So there are conspiracy theories that a member of the flying squad was able to infiltrate the house and actually kill them at point blank range. If you go into the house, you will notice that some of the bullet holes in the walls are straight bullet holes. It's not like they're from an upward trajectory. So there are speculations that somebody did go in there and point blank shoot them. There is a conspiracy theory that it was a murder suicide, right? That, one of them said, "Take me out and then shoot yourself." So they did have multiple bullet holes in each of the bodies when they were found. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories about how this gun battle ended. But obviously it culminated with those 2 deaths. And I think they do want to make sure that their spirit remains there and that they tell their story.
And you hit on a couple really good points just then. One, about the fact of the house being moved. That's typically a question that I'm asked a lot. A couple locations that I've actually investigated in previous seasons, the homes have been demolished, and I've had people ask, well, what happens to those spirits? I mean, do they stay on the land? Do they go with the house? This is, I think, a really interesting experiment, or a really interesting show of how the spirits did move with that house, because by all accounts there weren't any other stories of anything that had happened with this home, because it was a vacation home, so typically everything would have been kind of positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was only built 2 years prior.
Yeah.
This was a vacation home that Carson Bradford built, like I said, in 1930. It took him a couple of years to build it. It was extremely extravagant for the time period. Carson Bradford made his money in the amusement industry. So he opened amusement parks. And so he had money to spend money on this house. And so he took his time building it. So it was a new house, right? So they did not have any traumatic experiences. But after the shootout, the Carson Bradford family did start experiencing things. And even up until the house was moved in 2016, they would have guests reporting that they heard footsteps, that they heard glasses clinking, that they saw a woman on the back porch. So the stories really started from day one, and persisted throughout the house, even to this day, even though it's been moved.
Yeah, and then the fact that they had the presence of mind to keep the furniture and to keep everything as original as it was. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, it really is like stepping back into a time capsule, right? I mean, you experienced it when you walk in. It's like stepping back into 1935. The sconces are original. The hardwood is original. The doors are original. The bullet holes are all through the drywall there. Basically, instead of patching them up, they just hung pictures over them. Some of the pictures have bullet holes in them. So the furniture, there's a chair that you can take that's in the quote unquote kill room that you can take that has bullet holes in the back of it, and you can line it up to the bullet holes in the wall. So yeah, absolutely, that they had the presence of mind to preserve that, to me, is really a telling feature about this house. And it's sad that not many people knew the history behind it, right? I know that when we did our video, I had people come up that lived in Marion County, lifelong Marion County residents, that told me, I never knew that this was here. I never knew that this was part of our history. That in 1935, the national spotlight for months was on this it is literally a one stoplight town called Ocklawaha. And so I know you and I both love to highlight these type of locations where we can tell the history and get the preservation efforts out there.
Yeah, and that was what was so fascinating to me whenever you invited me to this location, was the fact, one, that to have such a huge history and a huge story, for it to not be investigated and to be virtually untouched. I mean, that was just really absolutely fascinating to me. And then the fact too of people that don't know the story behind it. I've encountered that with a lot of the different locations that I've investigated, of people who have lived in those towns, driven past those locations, and either they've heard about it and maybe they don't realize the significance, or they just haven't heard. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the entire story all the way around. I mean, how they came to be in Ocklawaha. I mean, just the entire historical perspective of it is such a fascinating story all the way around. I mean, it's just, for me, it's just one of these locations that just has the history and, as we both know, has the paranormal activity.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that was completely evident. So, so to go back to the other point that you made about the fact that it's real important, or it feels like it's real important to them to share that story,
Mhm.
and to and I felt like I kept hitting on it during my episode,
Did.
but I mean, that was really a trigger for them, the fact that they believe that they were murdered,
Mhm.
and it feels like they really wanted to get that part of the story out there. Forget what they did, forget why they were there and what happened, but it seemed very important to them that that part of the story be put out there.
Oh,
It really seemed to
absolutely.
hit on something.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that it seemed, both in your episode and mine, that it's not just residual energy, it's also intelligent energy. So there's a great mix of both. I know we caught things that lead me to believe that it's residual, and then the intelligent responses on the REM pod, on the spirit box, and in your case, the dowsing rods. I mean, again, it's just one of those locations that for us, really, I think was almost like a holy grail type of location. We've got the environment locked down, and we're able to positively say that these are not environmental factors causing these things. And so to me, it's just a great investigation location.
Yeah, yeah. And so let's kind of hit on that just a little bit, talking about, the REM pod activity, because
Mhm.
that was, to me, that was probably the activity that was the most prevalent throughout the investigation. And as I had said, we had set up a few hours before, left, came back. By the time we came back, that's when I was setting up a second round of cameras. I think I was changing out the SD cards and such, and setting those up.
Right.
And when I investigate, because I like to use my REM pod as a sort of a proximity meter
Mhm.
to let me know when something is wanting to get my attention when I'm doing something else. And that really kind of seemed to be what happened in the very beginning, that they wanted our attention and they wanted to communicate with us.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
From setup, you're absolutely right. From setup,
yeah,
you had it downstairs, and you and I were just upstairs, and all of a sudden it's going off. And
yeah.
that to your point, I think they just wanted to say, hey, we're down here. Let's go ahead and communicate.
Yeah. Did you get that type of activity when, like they wanted you to pay attention to them and talk to them? Did you
Oh,
get that when you were there?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you go and watch any of our video on this, the most telling thing that we used was the REM pod, that in the spirit box. As you know, there, like I said, there's no power in that house at all. So when we had the REM pod sitting on the spot where Mom's body was found, and Jenny and I are sitting back probably about 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet. And we're just sitting there quiet, and all of a sudden we say, Fred, are you here? And that thing starts going off. Freddie, or is Ma here with you? And it starts going off, and on command, like boom, 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 for about 15 minutes for us. It
Mhm.
was just on command. And when Jenny asked, were you murdered, the alarm sound switched. It was a more high pitched, almost like a squealy type of alarm, like, yes, we were murdered here. And
Mhm.
so again, that is just not so, it's intelligent, but then it kind of raises that intelligent level. Like, it was emphatic. It wasn't just the REM pod going off. It was an emphatic alarm of, yes, we were murdered. So to
Yeah.
your question, yeah, I think it was extremely intelligent the night that we were there. And you followed it up with your investigation, and I think both of us got similar results.
Yeah, I think so. And so I'm just going to hit on just a few of the comments here. Um, Thank you, Joe. We appreciate that. I know both myself and Dr. Sumner, that's how we really like to highlight our videos, really highlight the history, and the paranormal is always kind of secondary. And we've just been very fortunate in a lot of the locations we've both investigated that a lot of the activity seems to really be validated by that history.
Mhm.
Um, Nancy Weems asks, do you think Ma was more vocal?
Honestly, for yours, I think she was. For ours, I think it was more Fred, especially with the REM pod activity. We also got a little bit of what I feel was Alvin Karpis. Now, Alvin Karpis did not die in the house. He was caught in New Orleans in 1936, and then he went to Alcatraz, where he served 27 years in Alcatraz. And he actually died a free man in Paris in 1979. So he did not die in the house, but he was extremely close to Fred and to Ma. So it was interesting that we got a little bit of responses from him, I feel. But for us, it was Fred. I think in your episode, it was probably more Ma, especially there at the end with the dowsing rods.
At the end, that is how it seemed. I mean, we tried to do some different things. I know I kind of, and I was talking to you about this. I kind of felt like, because I was there for a long time, it seemed like, but I was. I sort of felt like, because each room had different significant things that happened in that, and you can just imagine, down there at the dining room table, them sitting at the table and plotting, or just kind of having their everyday conversation about, because I'm sure in the beginning they were concerned about being caught, but it seemed like after a while they got kind of comfortable.
Obviously, honestly, they weren't. They were out in Ocklawaha. They went into Ocala, which is probably about 15 minutes away from Ocklawaha. They were spending money, very lucrative with their money. They were spending it, very high rollers in Ocala. They were generous. They would invite people in. If you look at the crime scene photos or the evidence photos after the shootout, to your point, if you look at the table, there's shot glasses there, whiskey there, cigars there, newspapers spread out. So they really weren't. They were out fishing, which is kind of how the FBI found them, right? And we'll go back through the history in just a minute, but for all indications were they did not expect to get caught. It was just a fluke that allowed the FBI to actually find them.
Yeah, and so you can imagine that time kind of sat around there, having their gatherings and just kind of talking, making their plans and stuff. And then all the way up to the heightened emotion that would be happening while this gun battle was taking place. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to ask some of the same questions in those different rooms with some of those different tools, just to kind of see how similar and how different the activity would be. And a lot of the activity we'll talk about downstairs, it really seemed to center around, you can kind of start to get like a personality and stuff. You can sometimes start to see that from some of the different questions. And I really had to kind of change my questioning style when I was in this location to get some different activity, because I tend to, when I go in somewhere, I'm always respectful, regardless of whether I'm in a jail, a brothel, a hospital, wherever. I always try to be real respectful, but just because of the history of how we know Ma was a dominating presence, Fred was a little more of a subservient kind of person to his
her,
mother. Yeah, I found that if I took the approach of being a more dominant female or a dominant person, that's really when it seemed like Fred started to really kind of respond. And I found that to be very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that you used the gun and the money as the trigger item was genius. And to your point, I love the fact that you went in and you used the different tools, but yet asked the same questions, because, as paranormal investigators, we know that there are going to be different responses that come from each of those tools. So the fact that you did, and you were getting responses on each of them, was extremely telling in my mind, and does show that level of intelligence. So I think the way that you structured that investigation was really spot on for what Fred and Ma needed, and how they needed to communicate. Like I said, said, the dowsing rods and upstairs on that level, I think you were really talking to Ma. When you were downstairs, you were spot on talking to Fred. And I think a little bit, like I said, to Alvin Karpus. But, you know, like I said, I really enjoyed watching you on that investigation because you did use those different tools, but still ask those same questions to get similar responses.
Yeah, and I mean it really seemed like, and like I said, I'll be releasing more video as it comes out, or I mean as I'm finishing it. But you know, the gun, I mean, that was interesting to me because essentially, so when I start the video, the gun is already sitting on the table. But before that, you know, when I had gone upstairs to set everything up, it was more quiet until I set that down on the table. And then just bringing out the more items and bringing out the money. I've never had a REM pod so spot on when it comes to, you know, having them step back, having them move forward. And as I increase the money value, I mean, and maybe it's just me reading into it, but I really felt like I could really feel, and since his personality of, when I offered to give money, and then it's like when I didn't at first, it's kind of like, hey, you know, don't ask me to do something and not follow through. And then, I mean, because I mean, that would shut off. The more money I gave and I would ask it to shut off, it would shut off, because otherwise it would just sit there and scream, and it wasn't battery drain on the REM pods. And that's why we pulled out the second REM pod as well.
Exactly. And again, that is the same type of evidence that we got in our episode. Like I said, if you go back and watch ours, he was very responsive to the REM pod. When we asked questions about Ma, he was responding on that. And so again, that shows that level of intelligence. And, you know, to your point, you know, these were gangsters, right? These were guys that were used to wheeling and dealing, especially in money. Every one of them had guns. I mean, if you look again at the crime photos, after the shootout, the cachet of guns that was collected from that house is enormous. Tommy guns, shotguns, rifles, handguns. So there's so many, you know, that to me was an excellent trigger item to use for this investigation. That, the bullets, you know, whiskey, we use whiskey. We also use cigarettes as well on ours. So I think that combination was just a great technique to use for this investigation.
Yeah. And I actually want to go back because I feel like at one point, because I had set extra bullets down on the table, I need to go back and check, because I feel like at one point the bullets got knocked over, not at the very beginning, but then we went back and we actually stood them up and offered money for them to knock them over. And I want to go back because I feel like in the very beginning some bullets had gotten knocked over, but I need to go back and check. We've got some comments over here. Joe Mizell says, can you elaborate more on the tip that the FBI received, Kristy?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes just to kind of backtrack for a second to kind of tell everybody how we got here, just in case you don't know the story. So in the the mid 1920s, early 1930s, obviously you've got the gangster era, and there's two things that are really prevalent right now in this time period. From 1929 to 1939, you've got the Great Depression, and then from 1920 to 1933, you've got Prohibition. So this is leading two facets to really come to life. The first one is organized crime, and that's, you know, the Al Capones of the world. And what organized crime is doing is it is allowing really crime to fester, because these organized criminals are making deals with law enforcement, and they're saying, if you turn a blind eye to us, then, you know, and let us do our thing, we're going to give you some kickbacks. So because of that, that allows for the rise of gangsters, right? These bank robbers that are going in, brandishing guns, and actually going in and taking money from banks, from stores, from trains in some cases. So there's really this jurisdictional issue where they're crossing jurisdictional lines, and there's really no federal law enforcement to deal with these type of gangsters. So that allows for the Ma Barker gang to really thrive during this era. So you've got Ma and her four sons that are really out there committing crimes. One of her sons, Fred, ends up going to prison where he meets Alvin Karpus. So when both of them get out, they form the Barker Karpus gang, which becomes the most prolific gang of this time period. They amassed more money than all of the other gangs combined. So now what they want to do in 1934, they've decided that kidnapping is going to be more lucrative than just bank robbery. So the first person that they kidnap is William Ham Jr. He's a brewer. And so they get $100,000 ransom for him and they release him unharmed. So they're like, great. Okay. So now we're going to do somebody else. So they kidnapped Edward Brimmer and they wanted $200,000 ransom for him. So once they get that ransom, before they get the ransom, they take him from Minnesota to Illinois. So they've moved him across state lines. Now this goes against the 1932 Lindbergh Act, which if you're kidnapping somebody and you take them across state lines, now the federal jurisdiction comes into play. So you've got J. Edgar Hoover, who's head of the FBI since 1924. He now has the authority to go after these guys. So once they get the ransom and release Edward Brimmer, the gang splits up. So they've got $200,000 and they split up because they know J. Edgar Hoover is on his trail or on their trail. So Ma's son, Arthur, who's called Doc, he goes to Chicago. Ma and Fred go down to Ocklawaha in Central Florida, and they rent this house under the name of T.C. Blackburn. And so they're there. They rent the house in November of 1934. And in January 2nd, 1935, J. Edgar Hoover tracks Doc, who's in Chicago. They track him to his hideout. And when they raid his hideout and arrest him, they find a letter that was written by Ma to Doc, and it references the fact that they're in Florida and they're at a lake where his brother Fred is hunting an alligator named Big Joe. And so the FBI takes this information and they go down to Florida and they actually find 2 lakes that had an alligator named Big Joe. The first one is up near Gainesville, but a trapper says we've already killed that alligator. So the only other lake that had an alligator named Big Joe is Lake Weir. So they go down to Lake Weir, the flying squad. There's 12 FBI agents. They go down to Lake Weir, and they start going around Lake Weir in boats. There's 2-man teams. They're going around in boats, and they see a guy out on a dock and he's fishing. And they said, how's the fishing today? And he's like, there's nothing in the lake. And they identify him positively as Fred Barker. So on January 16th, 1935, this flying squad surrounds the house and a gun battle ensues. It lasts about 4 hours. About 2,000 rounds is fired between the two sides, and it culminates with Ma and Fred being killed. So after that, J. Edgar Hoover claims victory over the Barker Karpus gang, but it isn't until 1936 that they actually capture Alvin Karpus. So that's really, in a nutshell, in a very quick nutshell, how we get to the Ma Barker house. And so that leads us to our conversation tonight. So that's the story.
And looks like we have another Florida native that was just talking about this in the comments. So thank you, Ken, and thank you, Kristy. Let's see, what else do we have here? Let's see. Thank you, David. This was probably definitely one of my favorite investigations. One, again, we all love those locations where they're not over investigated, but just the history, the story. When you're investigating, a place like this, like the jail here, I mean, there are a lot of stories. Like they say, every sentence has a story. So I mean, there are a lot that go along with it. But within this house, being essentially a virgin house, and then also having this amazing story, you're really able to go in and focus based on what you've read in the history, and then also what's in there. You're able to really hyper focus on this. So I was actually quite on the edge of my seat during the investigation itself. I think there was a point in time. It got pretty intense. We actually had to stop and go out on the porch because it got so intense.
And to your point, the intense level is heightened by the fact that this is dark. I mean, it is a dark location. Not dark, like spiritually, but like physically dark. There's no street lights. There's no car lights. It is a pitch black location. The only light source that we had was our flashlights and your filming light. So that really heightens that awareness as well. Really brings those senses out. So yeah, even when we were sitting out on the porch, it was like, this is an interesting location for sure.
I mean, there was no bathroom, that's just how, no electricity, no bathroom,
no
water. nothing that's going to overset any of the equipment off.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's in a way almost kind of like, what we talk about with the Estes method, when we go
Mm-hmm.
into that sensory deprivation state of the blindfold and the audio and everything. So you're in that state, so everything else is heightened. So
Exactly.
that's really kind of how this place felt when we would turn all the lights off. I know I didn't show it on this episode, but we actually had a really interesting Estes method.
Mm-hmm.
And you were calling out questions at the bottom of the stairs, and I was sitting upstairs because essentially you had I was sitting out like with my back to the kill room,
Right.
and we had a couple really interesting responses and a couple really interesting EVPs that I only heard a few things in the moment, so I really didn't hear as many disembodied voices with this
Mm-hmm.
one. It was more EVPs after the fact. I think we were hearing some people walking. But I was actually pretty fascinated after we did the rod session and after we did the Estes method. I was kind of fascinated by the EVP that we got when we started asking where the money is.
Right. The answer, the pool was quite interesting. Obviously you and I kind of figured maybe it was a pool hall of some sort. Because yeah, to your point, the $200,000 ransom that they received for Edward Bremer, nobody knows where that money went to. It was never really fully recovered. There's a lot of speculation that it was taken down to Cuba in exchange for quote unquote clean money. That they came back and dispersed amongst the gang, because while they were there in the house from November 1934 to January 1935, there were other gangsters that were coming in. Alvin Karpis routinely came in on his way to Cuba. And the FBI actually thought when they surrounded the house that Alvin Karpis was in the house. They had just missed him by a day. He was there the day before, but he had stopped down and he was on his way to Miami. So they had just missed him by like 14 hours, I think. So that they did use that as a stopping point, again, to get to Miami. And then it's suspected that they went to Cuba, took that money and exchanged it for the clean money. But the fact that they said pull, was quite interesting to me. I mean, that was a very direct response.
Yeah. And one thing, I'll go ahead and kind of talk about it since I'll be releasing it a little bit later. Like I said, we were there for quite a long amount of time, and so we were actually sitting upstairs taking a break, and I always use my phone on airplane mode and everything whenever I'm doing whatever. But we were taking a break, and we still had everything set up there in the kill room, and I pulled open my phone and I started reading. I had gotten a news alert from something that had happened in the Cleveland area where I live, and it was I couldn't have planned it better if I had done this myself. But it was a breaking news about a police involved shooting, and the police had shot the suspect. And so as I'm reading this story, because it apparently happened not too far from my house, I started reading it out loud, and everything had been pretty quiet when we were taking the break. And as soon as I read that the police had shot the suspect and the suspect had been taken to the hospital, the K2 meter starts going off, the red pod and the flashlight all starts going off, and like screaming going off. So I'm sitting there thinking, is it something to do with my phone on airplane mode? But I wasn't even in the room.
So you're outside on the outside the threshold.
Yeah. And so so we kind of noticed what's going on with this and stop reading. It stops. Then decided to read it for a second time. When I got right to that key point about the police shooting, again, everything starts screaming. And so so I'm really excited to actually release that piece of evidence because I was going to try to get it in this one, but I try to keep my episodes not short but shorter. So so I wasn't able to add this, but it's really quite fascinating footage to me. The fact that just really kind of showed that they were intelligent and that it was really something that triggered and struck a nerve with these spirits. And that kind of led to a whole other line of questioning after that. that they really started responding to, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think that the level of intelligence for these spirits in this house is quite extraordinary. It's one of those locations where you know, you dream of getting some of the responses that we've gotten, both your team and mine. You know, to your point, the fact that all of those pieces of equipment simultaneously going off when you're reading this story, the intelligent responses that you got from direct questions, the REM pod activity, the spirit box sessions. I mean, for me, that was when we did our investigation there. If you watch our episode, that's the best spirit box response I've ever gotten in any of the locations we've investigated. I mean, we specifically asked what happened in this room, and in this, on the spirit box, it said, "They murdered us, we the ones dead." That entire phrase, you don't get a phrase on a spirit box.
No.
And so to have that entire phrase come through, to me, was absolutely fascinating. And both yours and mine, when we said, "Can you say the name Blackburn?" Boom, Blackburn comes through the spirit box. And Blackburn was the alias that they used to rent the house in 1935.
And I got Blackburn in there as well. When I asked who rented the house, it said Blackburn, which you're not going to just pick up on a random, you know, Thursday night on a random radio station as you're scrolling through. Plus the name Kate, got the name Kate. And the fact that that mob went by so many different names, or had so many different names.
Yeah, like I said, the K2 session, or the spirit box session that we had at that location, was, I ranked that as the best spirit box location, or spirit box activity that I've had in any location. And I know that some of us think that, you know, the spirit box is hokum or whatever, and that's fine. But for us, to Miranda's point, when you're saying, "Can you say the name Blackburn?" and Blackburn comes through that spirit box, and you're getting the names Fred and Kate, and "They murdered us, we the ones dead," in a location where 2 bodies were found, that to me, it's very, very hard to explain. So, you know, for, like I said, for me, that made me a believer of the spirit box.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend. I know that there's a lot of people here in the chat room that know you and that have watched your episodes and know your extensive knowledge on this location. So I would definitely recommend that they go back and they check out your video and see what you captured there, because again, just absolutely fascinating, the direct responses that was being captured there on the spirit box that night. Couple more questions here. Karen asks, "Do you plan on doing another investigation at the Ma Barker house?" No, currently at this time, I don't think they are doing investigations. I don't believe they're doing investigations right now at that location. And I know, kind of one of those things with COVID and all that type of stuff, a lot of different locations have not opened back up to the public. I'm not really even sure. I filmed this particular investigation, I think 2 years ago, 2019. Yeah, and I'm just now releasing it because it fit with the haunted home episode or season that I'm doing. It would definitely be a great location to get back into, but currently at this time, I don't think they're doing those.
Right.
And then Joe says, "Dr. Sumner, that was amazing. How clever of the FBI, looking for an alligator that's taking it to another level."
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, very clever of the FBI, very stupid on the part of Ma Barker. You know, it's just, it really, in my mind, that one letter absolutely led to the downfall of the Barker Karpus gang. So it's one of those things that you just got to be careful what you put down on paper.
Were they, from all of your research, were they was the reason they were so prolific and everything, was it because they were smart and like smart gangsters, or were they lucky, in your opinion?
I think a little bit of both. I think they were smart. Now, an interesting thing is, as I said before, Alvin Karpus, he was arrested in 1936. He spent 27 years in Alcatraz as the longest prisoner to serve in Alcatraz, but he was paroled, and he actually died a free man in 1979. He moved to Paris, and there's actually an interview with him that I watched. And if you listen to Alvin Karpus, he actually said that Ma was just this little old country girl from the Ozarks that liked crossword puzzles and hillbilly Christian music. And so she was not the mastermind. He was adamant about the fact that she did not plan anything. But in my mind, you know, you're not going to learn to shoot a Tommy gun the day of your death. So I think that he was really covering for her. I think she did have an understanding of what they were doing. I do think she did a lot of the planning. And I think also the fact that they were a very close-knit family, all four boys and their mom, I mean, they worshiped her. And I think that anybody that went outside those ranks got killed. You referenced in your video Arthur Dunlap. Arthur Dunlap was Ma's paramour, and they thought that he was getting a little too loose lipped, so they killed him. So they were very they were not shy about killing anybody who they thought was talking too much or gonna kind of spill the beans on what was going down. So I think that's another reason why I think the family aspect of it and that close-knit family at that really kept them loyal to each other.
Well, and it was interesting too when we mentioned that on the Spirit Box, I got the word backbiter, which was
Yeah.
odd,
Mhm.
to just get on the radio.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, and as Karen says, nice cover on Ma Barker's point. It was probably at that time too. I mean, probably a lot of people didn't think women were capable
Oh,
of that sort of thing either.
yeah, you're absolutely right. So there was an uproar when Ma was killed. There was an absolute uproar saying that how could you kill this woman? And so there was a conspiracy theory that said because up until the fact that J. Edgar Hoover, up until their death, Ma was talked about as being part of the gang, but not so much the matriarch of the gang. So after she died, J. Edgar Hoover took a lot of heat for killing this quote unquote old woman. And so that's really when you start seeing the wanted posters really come out and say, she was wanted, right? She was part of this gang. So he had to really kind of backtrack a little bit and say, no. She was the leader of this gang. She was the matriarch of this gang. So yeah, there was kind of that backlash when she was killed. Absolutely. But again, I think you've got to really understand that this was a close-knit family from the day they really started committing these crimes. The boys were really 8, 9, 10 years old when they started doing things like stealing gum from the general store and throwing rocks into the general store and just petty crimes. And Ma would go to court and just plead with the judge and say, oh, please, don't arrest my sons or anything like that. They're good boys. So she covered for them from an early age. And again, that's really what led to that close-knit connection. And I think that they really did bring her into this. And I think she knew a lot more than what Alvin Karpis said she did.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, you can kind of parallel that with like with at the time, like Lizzie Borden, she got off because they didn't think a woman was capable
Absolutely.
of doing that sort of thing. So, I mean, you can really, it really kind of makes sense with the time frame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit more about the upstairs, some of the things we got up there. In the kill room, one of the things, again, with the direct responses, the flashlight responses that was going on in there. Now, again, people have varying opinions on flashlights as well as the SLS camera. So, we were using some kind of controversial equipment in the paranormal community, but it's interesting that we put the flashlights in the exact same spots where the bodies were found. And, Fred was directed to light up his light when he was going to respond, Ma to light up hers. And also keeping the SLS stable. They will get false positives if they're mapping, within a box type area, door frames, holes, different things like that will cause them to sometimes get some false positives. It's interesting that when we started getting the responses from Fred, we were able to map the body that was there or the figure there in that very spot. And it stayed there. As long as we were getting responses, which I thought was kind of intriguing. And then also the fact that they were direct when you asked them to step back. When you ask a particular question for that specific person, they would light their light up. I mean, to me, it was the best, most direct um, flashlight responses. I mean, even when you would count
Hmm.
for them to light it up or turn it off, or use again, using the money as a trigger item and that sort of thing, they were turning those off exactly. And when we were outside of the room asking specific questions, when they would light the REM pod up,
Hmm.
as soon as we would say step back, the flashlight was actually sitting back behind.
Correct.
Every time we would ask them to step back from the REM pod, they would step back, the flashlight would turn on. It
Yeah.
did that 3 times in a row. I mean, just very direct responses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your point, I think that is a very active room. Another thing was, you highlighted it briefly there near the end of your episode, but we had another REM pod in that room, the bedroom next to the kill room. Now that's the room where Ma actually slept when they rented the house. That was her bedroom. They know that because when they infiltrated the house, that's where women's clothes were found. That's where a suitcase was found that had women's clothes in it and such. So that was Ma's room. And so when you started asking questions like where's the money hidden and stuff, that REM pod started going off. Again, there's
Yeah.
no power acting on this REM pod at all. So I think the upstairs is extremely active. To your point, I think the kill room is just one of those areas where you've got two bodies that were found in this room, two spirits that were released simultaneously under very traumatic circumstances. And I think the energy in that room is just off the chart. I mean, everything that we use, the REM pods, the flashlight, the dowsing rods, the spirit box. I mean, it is just a plethora of paranormal activity. And that's one of the reasons why I love this house so much.
Yeah, yeah. Joe Shortridge asked, he said on a side note, he said, was there blood soaked into the floor?
Absolutely, Joe. And that's a great question. There was blood soaked into the floor. Interesting fact, when they moved the house in 2016, Marion County asked the sheriff's department to come in and do a luminol test on the room. They did, and they absolutely found blood spatter on the floor. They found blood spatter inside the closet, which was just behind where Ma was killed. And they found blood spatter where Fred's body was. So they swabbed those hardwoods. It had never been done before. And so, yes, they absolutely found blood there.
Wow. And that leads to whole other theories about residual and intelligent activity and DNA and that sort of thing. It's just a whole fascinating study on that. Nancy Weems also says a lot of women in history were gangster leaders. Very true. Very
Yep.
true. Some definitely interesting stories there.
Mhm.
And like I said, Joe, definitely go back and check out Dr. Sumner's
Thanks,
episode
Joe.
on that. We're getting close to wrapping up time. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and get those put in here into the chat room and we'll address them. But in the meantime, Dr. Sumner, why don't you tell people where people can watch your episode and where they can find some of these other great history-filled episodes that you put out?
It's under Soul Sisters Paranormal, so www.soulsistersparanormal.com. That's our website. All of our episodes are on there. We're also very active on Facebook under Soul Sisters Paranormal, and our YouTube channel is under Soul Sisters Paranormal as well. And if you don't mind, just one quick second. For those of you who don't know, I'll round out the history of the Barker gang quickly. As I said before, Ma had 4 sons, Arthur, Fred, Herman, and Lloyd. We know that Fred was killed in the house in 1935. Arthur, once he was captured in Chicago, he actually was sent to Alcatraz as well. So he served 2 years in Alcatraz, and he attempted to escape. He climbed the walls. He made it all the way down to the water when he was shot and killed by the guards of Alcatraz. Herman, he was actually killed in 1927. He was a part of the Barker Karpus gang that was involved in robbing banks, and so he had robbed the bank. He was coming out, and he was shot. And he got into his getaway car, and they were pursuing him. The cops were pursuing him, and instead of being taken alive, he actually pulled over and killed himself. Lloyd was the one Barker boy that actually tried to go straight. He was in the military for a few years. He did get out of the military and he became a cook in Colorado. He lived in Westminster, Colorado with his wife. And one day she came home and he opened the door to her and she had a shotgun and she blew his head off. And so you know, that's how Lloyd ended up. After they were killed, Ma and Fred's body actually laid in a mortuary in Ocala for about 8 months, because Ma's husband did not want anything to do with it. So the FBI finally convinced him to come down and get the bodies. So Ma and Fred are actually buried in a pauper's prison, or a pauper's cemetery in Oklahoma. So that's kind of how that ended up. And as I said before, Alvin Karpis was the one person that actually lived free at the end of his life. So just some interesting ways to kind of round that up.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you know why Lloyd's wife killed him?
She had a mental breakdown. She just said that she didn't want to be married anymore. She said she had a mental breakdown, and yeah, just poor guy. He just came home, and when she opened the door, she was ready with a shotgun and blew his head off. Yeah.
Wow, that's just
He was
so
working for the
tragic.
postal. Yeah, he was working as a cook.
Huh.
Yeah.
Just absolutely tragic how every member of that family it's
Mhm.
other than, her husband. Just everything they went through and how they all ended up dying. It's really odd that
Yeah.
all of them had that tragic ending.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like I said, if you know, this gang, as I said before, amassed more money than all of the other gangs of the time period combined. And yet, if you go to search for Ma and Fred's graves, they just have a small plastic marker, a pauper's marker. And that to me is just very ironic, and probably one of the reasons why, you know, their spirits are so restless also, because they don't have that notoriety anymore. So like I said, for me, it's just an amazing story, an amazing history, and an amazing investigation location. So again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your episode and your investigation there. I think you did an amazing job really highlighting this house and highlighting the spirits there, because I mean, I do think that they just wanted their stories told, and I think you did a great job doing that.
Well, thank you so much, and I echo those sentiments to you as well. So, I
Thanks.
mean, you put out such a great video that inspired me to want to look into that location, and so thank you. That really means a lot. Your compliments on that.
Sure.
Just going to check here because, like I said, we're in the process of wrapping up. The energy in the kill room gave me goosebumps. Just being there in person, being in there, being able to stick your fingers in the bullet holes,
Yeah.
and like Dr. Sumner said, I mean, just to see, because some of them you could see and I think we showed it in a few, the side trajectory that some of those went in and how some of them went in straight, but to put your fingers in it, to be able to stand there on the hardwood, because I actually investigated. Sometimes I'll investigate barefoot, especially if I'm in these houses. I don't know, it just gives you that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an odd feeling. It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's to be there in person and, be there. Nancy says, do you think there were other spirits there? Seemed like there was a younger one there. I didn't really feel anything else. Like I said, for me, I mean, and who knows? I don't know what happened on that property. I don't know what happened on the property where that house was built or where this house was currently moved to. I think spirits can travel, but the thing I really liked about this particular location was the fact that it did seem so pure.
Mm-hmm.
We were there to investigate this story. The Nickerson Sneed House,
Mm-hmm.
Octagon Hall, these other locations that I highlighted there. I mean, they all had multiple families that lived in the homes, multiple tragedies and stories that each of these families had encountered, multiple things that had happened on the land.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of any of that. Again, this was sort of a virgin house,
It
and
was.
so what was so interesting to me was the fact that you really could pinpoint and really hyper focus on those
Mm-hmm.
particular stories. Again, not to say there wasn't something there, but for me personally, I didn't feel there was. How about you?
Yeah, not for me either. But Nancy, you could probably pick up on things that we can't. As I said, I spent a lot of time there as a docent. I was there almost every other day by myself at some points, and I never encountered anything that I would consider younger. We did have a medium come through on one of the day tours that said she felt Al Capone there. There's no reason why Al Capone should be anywhere near that house. I don't know why he pops up everywhere. I never felt Al Capone there. To me, the dominant spirits were definitely Fred, followed by Ma. And I do think Alvin Karpus was there to some extent, but not as prevalent as those two.
I don't know if aren't gangsters pretty territorial too? I mean, I could I could
For
see
this one, I
that.
do. For this one, I
Yeah.
do think they are. For me, I think this was the house they rented, this is the house they died, and this is the house they're staying in. Like I said, it's been moved, right? It's been moved 4 miles from where it was, and yet they decided to go with it. But like I said, the residual energy is off the chart, and the intelligent energy is off the chart. It's just, to your point, it's just a virgin location that is just,
Mhm.
to me, I feel very fortunate that to have the opportunity to be there, and to be there with you as well was just a great experience. So to me,
Yeah.
just the history behind it's awesome.
I would love to. That's an interesting point you just brought up with Al Capone. I would love to sit down with somebody, as I laugh about it because I'm surprised Al Capone's not here. Uh,
It seems that he's everywhere.
he's everywhere. I would love to have a map of all the Al Capone spiritual sightings, just because it seems like anywhere and everywhere that man is. He's talk about notoriety.
Yeah.
Let's see, and just ask if did I get an opportunity to do any sketches of the house? I did not. For this, when I do my sketches, I didn't really feel like it would be fair for one in this house because you know the wanted posters and everything is so. I mean, they're just so prevalent with these folks, and typically whenever I do my sketches, those tend to be a little more. I don't want. I don't know the wording I'm looking for, but more of an unknown sort of thing. I didn't really feel if I went in and drew Ma or Fred or any of those folks that were related to the house, that it would be as pure, and I didn't really feel like I could really qualify that
Mhm.
because I'm going there. This is the story. Um, and then two, I don't know how I would match something up if I was to get something else. Those to me tend to be more. I'm actually doing a residential next Tuesday, and the specific reason I'm going there is to actually draw. And the lady, she feels she is getting a message from someone. I really don't know anything about this lady, and I refuse to really. I don't want to know anything about her friends. I don't want to know anything about her family. I really want to go in and see what I can get. So it's a great question, but I tend to kind of try to reserve some of that. And this is going to be the first time I've drawn in a location in about a year and a half. So I'm actually really looking forward to that to see if it happens, if I'm able to do it. So I do tend to kind of do that. So great question. Um, and then Karen also asks, is the original site of the house active? That's a good question.
It is a great question. From what we've heard, yes, the Carson Bradford family never allowed investigators to go onto the house or go onto the property or into the house when they owned the original location. And then afterwards, when the house was moved, the new owners have no trespassing signs all over the original property now. They did allow, after the house was moved, they did allow a metal detecting group to go in there, and they found some fascinating things. They found a ring that belonged to Fred Barker. They found a lot of bullet casings. They found some coins and such. But as far as paranormal investigations go, they won't allow anybody on that property. And Carson Bradford and his family never let anybody in. Now, neighbors would say, after the shootout, neighbors would say that they would see a woman standing on the back porch. They did see lights in the house when nobody was there. They did hear noises from the house when nobody was there, again, because this was a vacation home. So the neighbors did report that. But as far as an official investigation, paranormal investigation, that was never allowed. And the original property owners didn't allow it, and the current ones don't either.
Good question. And I may have misread Joe's comment. Janet says, "What about drawing the actual house?" I do actually. That is one of the locations. I have about 5 drawings that I'm working on. That, as you guys know, I like to draw the different locations, and that's how I fund my travels and everything. So, the Ma Barker house. I did do Octagon Hall, that is up on the website. So all the houses that are featured in this season will be up there. And who knows what will happen when you sit down and you spend 8 to 12 hours actually sitting there drawing the location. To me, it tends to connect me with it. So there will actually be a drawing of that house that hopefully will be coming once the season is officially over. The jail, several houses, several other buildings will be coming out hopefully by the first part of the year. And Joe also says, "Thank you, Dr. Sumner, for your input in this investigation. I hope Miranda can get you to come back soon."
Thank you, Joe. And I'd love to hear your input on, if you ever watch our episode, what you think as well, because I think those correlations are really kind of interesting, both Miranda's episode and mine, just to really kind of validate that we're getting the same thing, which just really bolsters the spiritual activity there. I think the paranormal activity.
Yeah, so definitely go check hers out on that. Keep your eyes open. I hope to have that body camera footage ready to release from that segment where I got the news alert on my phone. I'm hoping to have that out. It will either be out probably tomorrow or definitely this weekend. So that will go on as a supplement to this video. And a couple other things coming up. It seems like the season of Ghost Biker has just gone on forever. So it's not been your typical season, and I do appreciate all of you guys for bearing with me. I have never been this busy before in my life, and so I feel very honored to be able to get out what we've got now. We've got 4 episodes. I'm actually doing a couple bonus episodes that are going to be coming out. And so typically the season ends in October. We've extended it here in November. I have a very special episode that I'm working on, and it's multiple parts. And so the season finale would typically be this coming Tuesday, but I actually need another week to get that finished. So in 2 weeks, the season. I probably shouldn't say that and jinx myself, but in 2 weeks, the season finale of episode 4 is going to be coming out. And so unless something happens, that should drop the Tuesday before probably before Christmas, the Tuesday before
Come back, Ghost Biker. Got back a little bit.
Exactly. We're just going to stretch this out the rest of the year. So it should come out around Thanksgiving. But I promise it's going to be a very interesting one. With,
it's going to be good, folks.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. It's going to be good.
A great story. So may even have some live action in there. You never know. But so stay tuned on that. Bear with me as I'm wrapping up this season. And then once all this is over, said and done, probably be a little bit of a break with the Ghost Biker Garage, but we'll pick that up either mid-December or or definitely the first part of the year. Because again, we've got things rolling here with the jail and all that, and kind of take a little break. And then next year, of course, we should be back on track, hopefully, for every Tuesday in October. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So, yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. And anything you got going on, Dr. Sumner, that's coming up that you want to?
No, just working here at the jail. If y'all are in the Tennessee area, please come visit our jail. It's really awesome. It's got some great paranormal activity, great history. We're in Huntsville, Tennessee. So Miranda and I are very proud of what we have here. So if you're ever in the area, please stop by and say hello. Thank you for all of the people who watched tonight, all the comments, and just really paying attention to our stories. We really appreciate that. And thank you to all of our veterans and military personnel on this Veterans Day.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, for all your kind comments and everything. So we appreciate you guys sticking with us through the season and sticking with us through the episodes. I absolutely love these behind the screens because it gives us that opportunity to really go in, really talk about that history from these stories, because you can only cover so much in 20, 30, 40 minutes and still keep attention and cover everything. So gives us that opportunity to do that and really talk about the techniques and then just really interact with you guys. So we really appreciate that. And so, like I said, in 2 weeks, we'll have that new episode dropping, but we'll have some things coming up in the next between that time too. So just stay on the lookout for that. So I hope everyone has a great night, and we will talk to y'all soon.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.